Welcome to Church and State with Brian McCall and Chris Ferrara. Well, we've had an interesting week in the Trump administration. So there's a couple of times we've talked in the show how judges were just slamming down anything he tried to do. You had to pay every bill that someone might present to you. Can't fire anybody. But it does seem like the Supreme Court might, again, it's early days, but might be willing to tell these judges, hey, you've gone too far. So this is the firing employees case. There's a bunch of them recently where the Supreme Court has at least temporarily stopped the immigration one. So what do you read? Do you read this to be a real change, or do you think it's a temporary victory?
I think he ultimately has to prevail. That's why he's getting stays from the Supreme Court. They just issued a stay in the National Labor Relations Board case, where the head of the National Labor Relations Board was fired by Trump because basically she's his adversary.
Right.
So then she gets reinstated. But then there's a problem. You can't reinstate her as chairman because then she's an agency head, which is a problem. Trump has the right to remove agency heads. So the court reinstated her as just a member. And then as a member, she rescinds his firing of 6,000 people, exercising executive authority against the president.
Wow.
So then they go to the circuit court, which grants a temporary stay by a vote of 2-1. Of course, the Republican appointees vote for the stay. The Democrat votes against it. But he gets the stay. And then an en banc panel, the full panel of the seventh of the D.C. Circuit comes in, and by a vote of 7-4 with 4 dissents, they restore the reinstatement, creating chaos again with the two agencies involved, one of which is the National Labor Relations Board. Wow. So John Sauer, the new Solicitor General, writes an absolutely brilliant brief seeking an administrative stay just for starters from the Supreme Court, which, thank heavens, they granted. So what's going on here is these federal judges, because Democrats don't have Congress now, the federal judges are going to step in and try to run the executive branch. They're going to try to tell Trump who he can hire, who he can fire, who has to stay on board as his adversary, basically exercising executive authority against the will of the executive.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. So I think that ultimately he will prevail in these cases. He has to, no matter what the political inclinations of a certain justice who I won't name, he'll have to join. Let's just say that, because otherwise there's no executive branch any longer. He's just another bureaucrat.
Right.
So I think he's going to prevail on all of these cases where judges are issuing these ridiculous mandatory reinstatements by TRO. You can't compel anybody to do anything with a temporary restraining order because that's a mandatory injunction. Temporary restraining order means you're restraining someone, not ordering someone to reinstate thousands of employees or the head of the National Labor Relations Board. That's a mandatory injunction. The whole pretense of the TRO was shot down by the Supreme Court and granting stays because it's effectively an injunction, and injunctions are appealable. They were trying to use this trick of using a temporary restraining order, which
because it's not appealable, right?
It's not appealable. They just call the injunction a TRO, temporary restraining order, and then hopefully that Trump can't appeal it. But the Supreme Court's not buying that. It's basically an injunction. So I think he's going to prevail. This is just the last desperate effort of the deep state using judges this time instead of ridiculous congressional investigations to hamper Trump. They can't prevail ultimately if we still have a so-called tripartite system of government with an executive branch.
Well, the immigration one was really interesting because literally this judge was now saying, oh, you need to go back to El Salvador and bring these people back. I mean,
yeah. Well, Bollesburg has been shut down, but he's not taking it lightly. He's still trying to hold on to the case. He issued a minute order, even though his so-called TRO, again, it's really an injunction, was vacated by the Supreme Court. And that's not just an administrative stay. That is a stay pending a merits review, which indicates that Trump's going to prevail. He decided he would issue a minute order and ask the plaintiffs if they think there's any other basis on which he could keep the case.
Oh, gosh.
It's basically openly defying the Supreme Court. But the holding in that case is narrow. The court basically said on a procedural basis, this is a habeas petition.
Yeah.
Bring these
Yeah.
people back. And that should have been brought where the bodies were. Show us the body, habeas corpus,
Mm,
in Texas. Instead, they
mm.
forum shopped. They tried to get a D.C. judge who seems to be getting all these cases, by the way,
Yeah.
even on the
Randomly
weekend.
assigned. Randomly
Oh,
assigned.
it's randomly assigned to the same judge.
Right.
So he has been deprived of jurisdiction. The administration has filed a polite notice saying, "Excuse me, Judge, but you don't have this case anymore. It really belongs in Texas. So dismiss, please, the complaint that was filed in the wrong jurisdiction
Mm,
in an attempt to forum shop so that you would get the case." I don't know
mm.
whether he has dismissed it yet. I haven't looked at the docket.
Wow.
But basically, these attempts. I mean, the immigrant has a right to contest his removal.
Right.
You can't just take somebody off the street and ship him to another country. If there's a removal order, he has the right, in this circumstance, to contest it. He gets due process under the habeas standard, though,
Right.
which is very difficult to meet. He's not going to get a full trial on the merits. He's an illegal alien.
Right.
So he'll get, some kind of a hearing, which will be summary and perfunctory, and he probably won't. These people probably won't prevail. They'll be removed, or in the case of those in Venezuela, if they use attorneys in the United States to litigate the habeas, assuming
Hmm.
that's possible, they'll be told you were lawfully removed.
Yep. Well,
But that case should have been brought in Texas. Blatant forum shopping. It's ridiculous. They're running around all over the country looking for Democrat judges to give the results that the Democrats want in a tug of war
yeah.
with the newly elected president, as if he hadn't been elected. It has to stop, obviously.
Well, on looking a little further, it's not been another good week for him because he one of the major pieces of his agenda really accords a lot with Catholic teaching about getting an economy that is properly ordered towards making things as opposed to making bankers rich. And he announced his sort of full scale tariff regime. And within less than 24 hours, he had 75 countries begging to negotiate with him. Oh, we're going to stop being bad, Daddy. I know you just caught us, we're with our hand in the cookie jar. Please, please, let's negotiate. Um, but what I found was interesting is how the money manipulators of this country, Wall Street, which is owned essentially by the top, sliver of the country, um, tried to scare everybody by tanking the markets, bringing things down, showing there was nothing really there because as soon as they got some shade of what they wanted, they just went right back up where they were. So, I mean, do you think in some senses what he's done is exposed the interests of the Democrat backer financial class, that all they care about is making money off of, cheap imports and international trade and don't really care about American jobs?
Yeah, and that's been the problem for well nigh 30 or 40 years. And so what Trump is trying to do is restore the basic notion of commutative justice,
Mm.
the equality of one thing for another. So, I mean, yeah. So he's saying, listen, if you tariff us, we'll tariff you. We'll establish an equality of tariffs so that we're trading on the same level playing field. So now he has a 10% tariff across the board. I know that they were ridiculing him because he had a tariff on some island somewhere.
Right.
And some snippy reporter said, well, did you use AI to generate the tariff schedule? But the stupid reporter didn't realize he's tariffing every piece of land on the planet. Because if
Right.
he doesn't, China will just use that piece of
Right.
land to transship.
They'll just ship everything there. Right. I mean,
But the
they're already
stupid
getting.
reporter doesn't know that because
Yeah.
these reporters don't do any serious research. They
Yeah.
just repeat the talking points that come through the earpiece stuck in their ears during the interview. They don't know anything about anything. So, I mean, Trump's way ahead of them. So what happened here was the massive, distributed tariff schedule prompted immediate reactions from 70 or 75 countries. They made telephone calls, so he backed off and just left the 10% floor tariff in place,
Mm.
which it begins to establish a rough equality. But it's a very simple idea. Why should we be at a disadvantage if they're tariffing American exports? Why are we not tariffing their imports to our country?
Mm.
Common sense.
Well, I love it.
And the Democrats were all advocating this 15,
Yeah,
20 years ago.
exactly. Back when they did actually seem to care about Americans other than the the top 1%. Yeah, exactly. But
Well, they have one principle now, the Democrats, that animates them. Is Trump for it? Say no more.
exactly, you're right, right. I mean, Trump could have some fun. I'm for the Democratic Party now. We hate the Democratic Party. Oh, wait, wait. Yeah,
That would cause an infinite recursion.
it was. That's right.
We
Well,
can't have that.
what I find is interesting is, he basically that his first premise is, yes, if you've been putting these tariffs on us for years, we're just going to equalize you, and then they say we're going to retaliate, and you're going to retaliate for us doing what you did, so you're going to now retaliate because we've equalized the playing field, right? So, and I loved how this one, the British said, we're not going to sell you any more Jaguars because you. I thought, well, there's an issue that really affects the heartland because there's a
I'm sure
lot of,
that's what caused the market crash,
probably
the
right,
Jaguar gap.
the Jaguar gap, exactly.
All 100 of them that are sold.
Exactly. Like that's how out of touch these people are. I think that really matters. But what I think is actually interesting, he's focused on the issue you said, which is very true, commutative justice. If you're going to make it hard for us to sell our products by putting tariffs on them, we're going to equalize it. But he's actually said more because he said, be careful. Even if they equalize the tariffs,
Right.
I'm also concerned about deep-seated other ways that they are competing illegitimately. So, I mean, the most blatant example is slave labor, right? So maybe
Right.
you're not tariffing our goods, but we are also talking about you can't go around exploiting people by using them as slave labor and then selling your, dress here for $5.50 because you had no labor costs. We're going to put a tariff. Now, again, he's focused more on the other first, but every time he talks, he says there are other issues here. And again, you would think from a Democrat perspective, this was the party 30 years ago. We're against slavery. We're against human trafficking. Now seems to the party in favor of, oh, it's so unfair to the Chinese that we're punishing them for using slave labor. It really is just insane where they've come
Well,
to.
then you have that moron, Jasmine Crockett. By the way, I mean, she's got to be the stupidest person I have ever seen in the United States Congress.
Oh,
She looks stupid. She sounds stupid. She is stupid. And she's so stupid that she embarrassed her fellow Democrats
yeah.
when she said the other day, we done picking cotton. We want them slaves overseas to pick the
Pick the
cotton.
cotton. We want some other slaves, right? It's like,
And the room went silent. She was not reading the room.
yeah,
She embarrassed herself. They're telling us the new face of the Democrat Party, a
right.
moron.
Well, this is also the woman that mocked the governor of Texas for being a paraplegic a week or two ago.
Yeah, called them Hot Wheels.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is the party of wokeness, of sensitivity, of don't misgender me, but if you want to, make fun of a paraplegic, go ahead.
Well,
Right?
they're in dire straits because they keep
Yeah.
coming up with the new face of the Democrat Party, and it's always a nitwit.
Well,
So
it's also
AOC, now she's the new face of the Democrat Party, another nitwit. And, Senator Kennedy,
yes,
the Just Folks guy,
yes,
who's about as dumb as a Harvard degree. He's a super smart guy. He comes across as just a country bumpkin. He
yes.
said, our program for AOC is let her speak. So, because every time she opens her mouth like Jasmine Crockett, she sinks the Democrats deeper into a
Yeah.
hole.
Well, no, it is funny. It is almost like every week there's a new face of the Democratic Party. It's like, wait, forget that face. And I love. There was about a week ago where there was Bernie Sanders, the 80-year-old socialist, is the new face of the Democratic Party.
And then,
Yeah,
well, that Governor Hair Gel is making his move.
yeah,
But he's as fake as Kamala Harris, the cackling fool.
yeah.
And his fakeness will not get him very far. He'll crash and burn
No,
just as readily as Kamala Harris did. So I don't know where they're going to get some kind of charismatic leader, but even if they find one, the only way he's going to get any traction is to say what Trump is saying.
yes, exactly.
Because Trump, as we said in last episode, Trump has cornered the market on common sense.
Mm,
The Democrats have wedded themselves to one insane proposition after another. Everything they say is insane.
yes,
From boys and girls sports, all the way down the litany of ridiculous positions, like we're in favor of slave labor. Basically, they're in favor of everything Trump is against, and against everything that Trump is in favor of. But Trump
yeah,
has now called the Republican Party the party of common sense.
Hmm.
And that's what they're doing. They're taking positions against common sense on every single issue.
Well, and that a little bit segues into our next story about the church because, again, I remember when I was back in private practice, the late '90s, early 2000s. One of the big liberal issues was to being against sex trafficking, being against international trafficking of people. They had fundraisers; it was all a big thing. Now they seem to have become the party in favor of it, right? Because what Trump is finding is essentially through the Doge initiative, hundreds of millions of dollars being just handed out to fund the invasion of our country, which was masking, a huge amount of sex trafficking and other trafficking. And ironically, one of the people who's been exposed as being deeply embedded in this is the Catholic Church, right? The Catholic bishops, we learned, were getting hundreds of millions of dollars to fund efforts helping traffic illegal people into the country for who knows what purpose. And he said, no, you're cut off. No more money for you. They sued him, got thrown out of court essentially for when they sued Trump to get their money. But now they announced this week, the USCCB, that after careful consideration and deeply painful decisions been made to stop partnering with the government because we can't afford running these services on just the donations of the faithful. And then later on in the statement, it said because over 90% of the costs were funded by the government before. So there were literally no faithful Catholics who wanted to donate money for these projects, and they were just living off of government handouts.
Well, where was the money really going? It was obviously going to headquarters with lots of nice furniture, big fat salaries for those involved in arranging the
Yeah.
human trafficking operations, and perks, cars,
Yeah.
equipment, all these cushy elements of a bureaucratic position within the ecclesiastical hierarchy. It was a bureaucracy within a bureaucracy. It was being funded by the federal government. How much of the money actually went to the people that were trafficked? Not much,
So,
just enough to get them over the border, and then
yeah.
they're sent into the various cities. By the way,
Yeah.
contrary to the Democrat narrative that we need them to pick cotton,
Right.
it was sent to the cities where they were getting benefits from local welfare programs,
Yeah.
including free education, free medical care, free lodging, and so forth. Not provided by the Catholic Church, but by the localities to which the human traffickers in the church were sending all these people,
Yeah.
including hundreds of thousands of children that apparently had been lost in the system. And who knows where those poor souls ended up.
Hmm.
So basically, you could actually make a serious case if you strictly enforce federal law for a RICO
Yeah.
prosecution
Yes.
of certain bishops.
It sounds like racketeering to me. I don't know, but it's interesting what they set up is in many ways the again this was set up long time ago, but was the Church of Pope Francis. Okay, we don't really have a church anymore. Everybody's leaving because nobody's interested in our banal on the spot liturgies or our watered down doctrine. So let's just become a government NGO, and our purpose is to work, for the government. I mean, it's essentially the Church of Pope Francis. We want to be an international NGO, not a religious organization.
Yes, but here's what Francis said
Yeah.
at the beginning of his pontificate. This is so typical. They always say the opposite of what they think and do. Here's what he said in April 2013. The church is not an NGO. It's a love story. But when an organization takes first place, love falls down in the church. Poor thing. Becomes an NGO. And that is not the way forward. But that is exactly what the Church of Francis is. It's an
Right.
NGO.
Yep.
It's all
Well,
it's involved in climate change,
uh,
illegal immigration,
region,
you name it. Social justice issues of all kinds having nothing to do with the salvation of souls. Oh, the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, hell.
right.
We don't talk about that anymore.
Or becoming spokesman for the WHO to promote certain newly developed substances that they were trying to inject into people.
Yes,
Right.
well,
Exactly.
I mean, of course, the Pope was all behind the COVID lockdowns. It was our duty to submit to
Yeah.
arbitrary government commands.
Exactly. Well, interestingly, I thought quite ironically, the week that that the church admitted they were sort of on the government multi-million dollar handout, really a long nightmare came to an end. Mr. Theodore McCarrick, formerly priest Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, finally went to his eternal judgment. And again, the destruction this one man worked in the church is extraordinary. From essentially grooming a ring of sexually deviant clergy, abusing many people, to being the point person for Pope Francis to negotiate the secret deal with China, the deal that's so good we can't tell you what's in it, to essentially capitulate to China, has finally met his eternal judge.
Yeah, it reminds me of the pilgrimage that Pope Benedict made to Fatima in 2010 when he was on the airplane. He was asked a question that he had pre-selected. He
Hmm.
wanted this question to be asked about this vision that the Vatican published in 2000,
Hmm.
depicting the Pope being executed outside a devastated city after he barely escapes with his life. What does this secret involve? He says. And out of nowhere, Benedict says it shows that the greatest persecution of the church comes not from without, but from within, from sin
Hmm.
in the church. And we're seeing this today, he said, in modo veramente terrificante, in a really terrifying way. Not like other times when we have corruption in the church, he said. That, he said, we've always known. But now we're seeing it in a really terrifying way. The worst attack on the church comes from within, from sin in the church. That's a verbatim quote. Now, the vision says nothing, absolutely nothing about sin in the church or an enemy within. The vision shows the Pope being executed by soldiers who are external enemies of the church. So here we have the situation with McCarrick revealed as an element of what the third secret must be talking about. The pervasive homosexual scandal in the church is an element of sin within the church, showing that the greatest enemy is within. And I'm finishing up a sequel to my book on liberty. And in that sequel, we have these popes, particularly Pius XII, who foresee a developing situation in the church. Pius XII said when he was Eugenio Pacelli in 1931, the Secretary of State for Pius XI, he said, "A day will come when the church will doubt as Peter doubted.
Hmm.
It will be tempted to believe that man has become God." So this is what we're seeing, the fulfillment, obviously, of the third secret. And that revelation must be to talk about what's going on in the church in a text that we have yet to see. But this is
Hmm.
what Benedict was talking about. And it certainly wasn't in the vision, so he must be privy to information about the mechanics of the church
Yeah.
that the Virgin revealed beforehand and we're not allowed to see. But that's what we're living through right now.
Well, he also said it, not in that interview, but another time, that the church in the future may be very small, that the church may be reduced to a handful of faithful, which again, I always wondered if that came from the secret as well, that prediction of his.
Oh, well,
Uh,
this is the great renewal of Vatican II.
right,
The church will be reduced to a tiny remnant.
right, exactly.
Yeah. The church will open to the world, and then everyone will empty out, and then you'll have a tiny remnant.
Yep.
Well, it's a brilliant strategy. Who knew?
But the remnant bishops want their palaces and cars, so they better become an NGO. I mean, that's right. Because a remnant can't support the life you're accustomed to.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
it's all about. It's basically a lifestyle issue for
Hmm.
these bishops. They lost a lot of extra income that was redounding to their benefit and to the benefit of the
Hmm.
ecclesiastical bureaucracy.
Hmm.
So, well, I mean, Trump's done the right thing.
Yes, that's very true.
So
Well,
anyway, the Pope has been rather silent lately, which is barely escaped death from his respiratory crisis. Now he's back in action to the extent that he can do anything at all. Apparently, he's not able to speak yet. He still has
yeah.
oxygen, supplementary oxygen to help him breathe. Let's just hope he doesn't do any more damage before his days on this planet are over.
Well, I know many people would say his not inability to speak is not a bad thing.
No, but I'm worried about the auto pen of the
The
papacy
yes, yes.
because there could be an auto pen at work here.
Who knows? He may pardon all of hell. Who knows?
Yeah,
Which,
that reminds me of a Babylon Bee parody
yeah,
where the
exactly.
Pope seeks dialogue with the souls in hell.
Right.
This is during John Paul II's reign. For too long, he says, a wall has divided us.
Right. Very true. Well, there you have our view of church and state just here the week before Holy Week, and we really hope all of you have a holy week and attend the ceremonies and have a happy and grace filled Easter season.
No, let's not forget that even with the church, after the crucifixion, there will be a resurrection.
Never forget that. All right, we'll see you in a few weeks.
Okay, God bless.